Welcome everyone. Today we have our another episode, and this is 286 episodes, and we are actually launching our event and activities around the world. And every countries we have our own representative from World Talent Economy Forums. And thank you for joining today's session. I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Talib Rafaels with his all of his experience from World Economy Forum, from United Nations, and from his political background. He is supporting World Talent Economy Forum initiative. This is very, very important for us. Beside that, we have our very good friend, Mr. James Eid, who is always support our initiative, and our
Hello,
friend,
James.
Mr. Aaron, who is also have some passions to work for developing nations. So I want to start from Professor Talib. Rafael, sir, how do you want to analyze today's topic is based on health and climate change? This is relevance, and we know that we have a lot of health related challenge right now. Let's say in Asia Pacific, in Malaysia, we have dengue related problems. Even we have diarrhea, we have many other problems. Even COVID is another problems right now. So how do you want to analyze this kind of problem, and how you want to share your experience from your UN, from your political backgrounds, how the developing nation should play right now?
Okay. Now, developing countries have a particular challenge because the spread of viruses creates an unfair world, actually. Even the vaccine now is a challenge because the world is vaccinating only those that can do it. You cannot have any economy really sustainable unless the whole world is vaccinated. This would take 5 years at least to vaccinate 70% of the population of the world. But more importantly is the climate change effect on this thing, I understand. So, climate change is part of sustainability, but it's not all of sustainability. This is important to keep in mind. We have environmental sustainability, we have social sustainability, economic sustainability, we have political sustainability as well. Sustainability to me is just to sustain life on Earth for the future generations, no more, no less. Sustainability is not anti-growth or anti-progress at all. Growth is a must. The story of mankind has been the story of growth throughout our history. So we cannot not grow. We should always keep in mind that growth and progress are very essential. We should grow, but in a sustainable way. We should progress in a sustainable way. For example, who said that the island of Manhattan was more beautiful before the city of New York was built? The city of New York gave the world so much. The world it is said now that 75% of the carbon emission is coming out of cities. But it's also said and believed that by the year 2030, more than half the world population will be living in cities. We can't stop that. We can't stop growth. We can't stop urbanization. We have to deal with this dilemma in a different way, in a sustainable way. Skyscraper is not our enemy. Skyscraper could be a disaster. It could be also the best solar collector and the best vertical garden in the world. So it's where to build and how to build. Sustainability is not just about not touching things. Sustainability is not synonymous with preservation and conservation at all. Sustainability is about moving things ahead. That's what I want to say. I'll stop at this point and hear what others have to say, and then we can continue this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Talib, for your amazing contribution and discussions on this health and climate change related issues. We have our climate change activist, Mr. Eric. So, how do you want to analyze today's topic about health and climate change related issues? Already, we are in trouble with our health, even healthcare systems, and a lot of challenge actually we have to face together. So, how do you want to analyze what type of solution we have?
I think that the most powerful and profound solutions are always going to start at home. And so I think one of the big pieces that we need to address, both with health and with climate change, is the education piece and empowering people to really take charge of their own health, take charge of the way that we live in the world, so that we can be healthier and stronger, and so that we can create a healthier and stronger planet simultaneously. And a lot of that has to do with ecosystem restoration, reintegrating ourselves into the ecosystem rather than looking at it as a source of, goods and resources. We need to be looking at it as our birthplace and the place that we all return to. And so stepping into that cycle in a way that's graceful and respectful and kind and conscious above all.
Thank you, Mr. Jamsid. We are in challenging situations. We need a lot more collaboration from the first world, as well as what Dr. Talib said about developing nations. And I'm also a big fan of grassroots level, how actually Dr. Talib Rafael always try to motivate me that we should more focus on grassroots level peoples, and these people are very much important. But how actually healthcare system right now working, so there are a lot of challenges. We utilize a lot of our resources, especially developed nations. They utilize a lot of their resources for many more innovations and different aspects, but developing nations still they are in trouble. Even let's say with this vaccine we are in a lot of trouble. USA have maximum vaccines in their hands. How do we solve? What is the solution we have? What is the responsibility of the developed nations to solve this problem? How do you think?
Well, I think there is a responsibility. If you have resources and others do not, why wouldn't you share them? So I think that there is a duty, not just a responsibility, to share. But there are systems problems, because we can look at it at the individual level and then also at the systems level. And their systems level are research and development and then distribution, things like that. Like how do we come up with the vaccine and how do we distribute it? And there are myriad numbers of difficulties that we encounter when we try to do that, even with the best of intentions. Now, we can question whether the best of intentions is already present, but there are problems even if your intentions are absolutely pure. You will run into difficulties in distributing them to the people that need them. So these things have to be addressed objectively, but also compassionately, and hoarding the solutions is not the answer. Sharing them is, but even if your intentions are pure, you will encounter difficulties. And this is when we have to work together. We have to, because one size will not fit all when it comes to solutions. We have to adapt. And so I completely agree that you start with yourself and then your community, and then who knows where you go from there. But what's locally effective for this particular locality may not be effective for another. So you have to adapt to your circumstances. And you change in terms of your own personal health, that's up to you. And you change, not entirely, of course, but what you want to do is focus on yourself first. Am I using energy correctly, ideally, efficiently, sustainably? Am I doing those things? Can I improve what I do personally? And if you say, well, what I do doesn't matter, you're just another brick in the wall. Because if everybody does it, then it does matter. But change yourself first. Because, if I just change, maybe there's no effect. But what if 1 million me's change? Then there's some effect. What if 10 million me's change? What if 50 million me's change? So all of a sudden, you've made a global impact. But you have to start with yourself. You can't change others. You can't control other people, but you can change yourself. So start with yourself. And the solutions have to be locally based, but there have to be a global solutions, even and collectively overcoming the difficulties.
Thank you. We have our friend, Mr. Aaron, and thank you, Dr. Shailesh Rao, for joining today's sessions. I'm coming to you before I want to discuss with my friend, Mr. Aaron. So how do you want to analyze today's topic, and what your views, how we can collaborate globally and can contribute for these grassroots level people?
Well, I think it starts with going out, sourcing solar panels, working on your own, small scale solar projects and then scaling it up from there. And you see a move towards that here where I'm at in Texas already, because I think a lot of people were caught off guard by the big freeze of this last year. I'm not sure if you all heard about that, but it was horrible for our power grid. So a lot of people are taking matters into their own hands here. You see a lot of efforts for financing large solar systems for cheaper than an electric bill would be. And then your neighbors see that you have no electric bill, and they always want to say, oh, well, you don't have to buy gas for an electric car, but you still have to pay for the electricity. Well, not necessarily, not if you get solar panels. So when people start seeing you driving around for practically free, eventually your neighbors do get kind of want to get in on that, I guess you could say. So around here, that's what I'm seeing on the grassroots level. And I think it's already starting to catch on globally. People are starting to realize, even people in my area who denied climate change, with the big freeze, they're starting to realize that, okay, maybe this is real. Maybe we actually need to start planning ahead. And I am seeing, more and more in media and locally and internationally, a push more towards this. So again, I think it's just individuals at this point riding this wave and going out and working on their own small scale projects, then scaling them up, figuring how it all works, and going from there.
Thank you. We have our another climate change activist, Dr. Shailesh Rao. So how do you want to analyze these health and climate change related issues?
Yeah. Back in 1989, I think, when Al Gore wrote his book, Earth in the Balance, he said that the environmental crisis is an outer manifestation of an inner crisis that is spiritual. And so he basically circled it back to each one of us having to take care of our own health and make sure that we are in alignment with our environment. And when we do that, the climate will automatically heal. So it's the way climate change is being framed today, it's being framed as primarily a fossil fuel problem, and that we just have to change to clean energy and everything will be fine. What they don't tell you is that even if today I'm able to wave a magic wand and transform all the energy infrastructure over to clean energy, you will not heal the climate. You will only stop it from getting worse.
Dr. Shailesh Rao, can you hear me?
Unfortunately, I think he's frozen.
I think we
Yes, yes, no problem.
It's frozen.
Yes, Dr. Talib.
The only way to...
Okay.
Can you
Dr.
hear?
Shailesh Rao, Dr. Shailesh Rao, can you hear me?
I can.
He can hear us.
Okay. You can
I can hear
continue.
you.
You can continue now.
Yeah. So what I was saying, when you look, how do you really heal the climate? Discover that it has a lot to do with animal agriculture. Animal agriculture, it turns out when you take into account the opportunity cost land that's being used for raising animals, is actually responsible for at least 87% greenhouse gas on an annual basis. So we wrote a paper about that and we just published. And so that tells you that our relationship with nature has a lot to do with climate change. And when we have a relationship of compassion towards all life, then fundamentally the forests come back, they start sequestering the CO2 that's in the atmosphere. We calculated actually if you just bring back the original forest that used to be there on this earth, you can literally reverse climate change. Okay, because we have cut 3 trillion trees on this planet over the last 8,000 years. And those trees, each tree on average can sequester 1 ton of CO2. So 3 trillion trees can sequester 3 trillion tons of CO2, which is almost triple the amount of CO2 we've added to the atmosphere from fossil fuels. So fundamentally, we can reverse climate change if we all go vegan and create a new economy that's completely plant-based. Okay? That changes our relationship with nature fundamentally. how we deal with other animals. We don't see them as objects that we can use their bodies. Because as long as we see other beings as objects, we will have climate change. But when we start seeing them as sacred, that they all have their own lives to live, and that we have to facilitate them, then we will heal the climate. And we heal ourselves at the same time.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I just want to share one of the important data, what you were discussing about. We cut our forest and everything. It's based on BBC. It's this report published year 2021, and what we are observing, the forest expansion and deforestation from 1990 to 2000s. We do deforestation around 16%, and we do forest expansion around 8%. 2000 to 2010, we do deforestation 15%. We like go for forest expansion 10%. So 2010 to 2015, we do deforestations, it's 12%, and we add like forest expansion 7%. 2015 to 2020, it's actually very difficult, like 10% deforestation and only forest expansion 5%. So we heavily cut all of our forest and everything. Dr. Talib Rafal, you are in very important position right now. You run many important organizations like United Nations, ILO, even your country is you play a major role as a parliament, as you are a great politician. So actually, what your observation, how actually United Nations play right now for solving these climate change related issues, specifically WHO, how they solving this healthcare related problem? Actually, we are observing, let's say from India, from even Bangladesh, Pakistan, every country right now in very challenging situations. Political people, they do a lot of corruptions. I don't know, we have a collaboration with international communities, how they observe, how they do work with this kind of developing nations. It's actually mysterious. How can we solve many challenging things we have to solve?
Okay, let's go down to the basic roots of the problem. The basic root of the problem is the multilateral system altogether. The United Nations is an example of the multilateral system that we're suffering from. The multilateral system is not functioning anymore. It's failed us. And the COVID-19 has uncovered this failure. Look at the EU, for example. The EU is not united anymore. Even the United States of America is not united. Every state is acting on its own, as if it's a divided States of America. I'm sorry to say this. No regional or multinational organization is doing its job because it has not been based on a fair, sustainable, and equitable system. I think what was said by the professor before is very important. We have to go back to our own selves and rebuild our multilateral system brick by brick from bottom up. That's the only way to do it. Each government is working on its own now, as if COVID could be solved like that. COVID could never be solved on each government. You cannot have in Europe a country that's insisting on what they call, when you travel and you come back to a country, you have to be quarantined. Then another country next to it that's only depending on vaccination passport. Third country is depending only on 72 hours testing. These are three different systems. They must come together. All governments of the world must come together and agree on one system that's doable and fair to everybody. Because that's how we build the multilateral system. I'm sorry to say this, but the UN is not helping us anymore. It's just helping its own self, unfortunately. That's what I want to say at this point.
Sir, if you think that UN is not helping anymore, so what will be the new model for this world? What do you think? How we can survive?
The new model is emerging from the people, from each individual on its own. You know, the world has survived the climate change. I think I agree with the professor, saying that we are going to overcome this. We've overcome many problems before. You remember we were living in the Ice Age at some point in time. We were able to overcome it. But we need a will, a political will. This political will has to come from the people, from each individual, from sustaining a democratic system. That's why I mean sustainability is not just about the environment. Sustainability is about social, economic, and political sustainability. You have to build a political system that is capable of reflecting what people's needs and interests are. You can't have a country that produces presidents like Donald Trump, and we say that that's democracy. That's not democracy. I mean, he was going to ruin the whole world by attacking this climate change thing. We're going to reverse it whether he or it's like it or not. We're going to reverse this. I have a belief in mankind. I'm an optimist by nature. But the important thing is to understand that the real problem is in our governments. Our governments don't want to work together anymore. They're not working together at all. Even neighbors are not coordinating with each other. So how could we deal with a problem like this if we don't have a minimum platform, a minimum common denominator for everybody to be on?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
We have our climate change activist, and he's also professor, and he actually supporting us a lot, especially like how we can develop different kind of strategy. He is Mr. Paul. So how do you want to analyze today's topic, health and climate change? What is the impact? How we can solve? What is the solution right now we have?
Well, I think that as we continue forward under our abrupt climate system change situation, there's going to be a lot more consequences to to humanity's health. I mean, obviously, I'm sorry I came in a bit late, so I don't know a lot of the things that you've already talked about, but with climate change, there's obviously going to be a lot more disease vectors and viruses springing up. So I think a lot of them will be airborne. So I think for human health, indoor air quality is something that people haven't paid enough attention to. So I think in the near future there will be a lot more regulations on indoor air quality. And in my view, the best way to increase indoor air quality is to increase the ventilation with the outdoors, the air exchange with outdoor air. And the easiest way to measure that, measure the amount of exchange between indoor and outdoor air, is with CO2 detectors, because we know what the level of CO2 is outside, and when the level of CO2 inside becomes, say, double that of outside, then you have a problem with stuffiness of air indoors. If there's any person with a virus, there be normal flu or any other virus, coronavirus, and even if they're wearing a mask and the air is very stuffy inside, then there's a risk to everybody of becoming sick from the airborne virus. So monitoring carbon dioxide levels inside as well as outside. And I think in order to do that, we need very cheap, inexpensive portable devices. Like, you can imagine a little CO2 detector. They can be miniaturized. So one on an iPhone, on your phone, and or on a wearable like Fitbit, or just individual monitors inside can go a long way to increasing human health. I just noticed this study in the U.S. on the amount of normal flu this year, and it's gone from very high levels. Normally every year there's a flu season in northern countries that occurs in the winter, because when winter comes, people tend to be indoors a lot more, and then spread normal flu a lot easier. Because of the flu cases this year have been way down of normal flu, anything other than coronavirus. So that's an important thing. Another interesting study to do with climate is when we have higher temperatures, male fertility drops significantly. Sperm counts and male fertility. So that's a sort of a feedback, a breaking feedback. As temperature rises more and more, we will have less population increase due to males being less fertile. So I think that's that's an important factor that maybe will put a brake on population. So there's all kinds of signs out there that what we're doing on this planet is obviously not sustainable, and we're running up against walls right now. Limits because of climate change, and that includes also food supply, not just quantity, but the quality of food, the amount of nutrients and that are within the food decrease as temperatures rise. I think within a decade, we're going to be facing global food shortages, possible global famine. So, that's in the pipes for what is coming. So, whether we initiate change ourselves to meet to start meeting some of these challenges that are near term in our horizon, or whether we don't do anything at all, just continue business as usual, we're running up against these walls, which will change us one way or the other. Either we do it by choice or we do it because we're forced to change. For example, in a sort of global famine situation.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Mr. Eric, you are also a climate change activist, and how actually Dr. Talib Rafal said that UN and many big countries now they are not active properly, and the mass people, the grassroots people, and the mass community, they have to take initiative. But from my personal experience from Asia Pacific, when I observe that mass people are not so much of aware about climate change, sustainable development, and this kind of things, I'm sure around 90% these grassroots people not aware about that, what we can do, how we can involve with these much communities, how we can work together and help each other.
So I think that especially in developing nations and in Southeast Asia in particular, and anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter if people are actually aware of climate change or not. If we can impress upon them the significance and the profundity of planting fruit and nut trees and developing resilient local both ecologies and economies, everybody speaks the language of money. And growing your own food is like printing your own money. Ron Finley, the gangster guard, growing your own food is like printing your own money. And so if we can really help people to understand that, like, okay, a banana tree, for example, if you plant one little banana pup, it accumulates a tremendous amount of biomass. And so that's carbon that's being sequestered from the atmosphere. It'll produce one rack that is, 70 to 80 pounds of very nutritious, potassium-rich food that's very sweet, very delicious, or can be harvested green and eaten as a starch, a very calorie-rich crop that we can use as a staple food as opposed to grasses. And then you cut down that trunk, it will build soil, it will feed the microbes, it will help to retain water during periods of drought. And that tree will continue to grow for decades and decades, producing more and more abundance each year as its root system spreads out and becomes more dense. Now, that's a very fast return crop. Papaya is a very fast return crop. These are trees that are very easy to grow. Coconuts can produce hundreds of pounds of very nutrient dense food every year. And all the while, you're getting byproducts of biomass that can be used for generating gas and fuels if it's combusted properly, with only an emission of a little bit of CO2 and some water vapor. You can combust the detritus and the dead branches of these trees. Macadamia nut is another great example of a tree that will tolerate drought, will tolerate floods, produces a lot of nutrition and simultaneously is producing a lot of fuel. Moringa is another tree like this. So there are many different examples of tree crops that we can be transitioning our diets and our ecologies and our economies towards, that create abundance, that people don't even need to know about climate change. If they know that relying on tree crops and locally grown food and locally sourced nutrition is more advantageous economically and for the sake of their own health, their own well-being, you're going to have a much more broad spectrum of nutrients and vitamins when you're eating locally grown tree crops than you are when you're eating imported monocrop grasses. That most of these grasses that the world's diet is based on, over 50% of the world's diet is consisting of three grasses: rice, wheat, and corn currently. And so all three of those grasses are annual grasses. That means their root system is very shallow, and those fields are very rapidly becoming depleted. The tilling causes soil loss and erosion. And so everybody knows you don't do the monocropped agriculture in your own backyard because it will destroy the soil. You do it somewhere far away that you can't see the destruction that's happening. But even in that, those grasses are almost void of nutrients at this point because they're only fertilized with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So the locally grown tree crops offers more nutrition. It's better for the ecology. It's better for the economy. And it offers, when it's grown at home, it doesn't cost you anything. You plant it once and it takes care of you for decades, for generations. So to teach them of that kind of multi-generational wealth that can be created through a few concerted and conscious efforts now will create a culture in which the climate is automatically considered by default, just as a matter of course. So that's my thinking on it presently.
Thank you. Dr. Shoilash, what I understand, you have a co-relationship with India, especially Indian communities. So according to WHO, we are observing Indian present situation is it's a very challenging situation because of COVID, because of many other diseases. Besides that, this is the observation of WHO. More people will die. Approximately 250,000 people will die because of malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, heat stress until 2030 to 2050 because of this climate change issues and other things. What your observation? What's the inside story of India? What's what we can do together for solving this Indian problem?
Yeah, as Dr. Rifal said, this is there is a lot of suffering that's happening in India that people are coming together from the grassroots to address. But there is not much cooperation happening, among the governments. But then again, I have to say that the Biden administration has agreed to let vaccines be licensed, and overcoming the WTO restrictions that were there. So that's a good thing that happened. So that's going to help. But in India, I think fundamentally we need to stop following the colonial model of development, which is saying, you need to subsidize animal agriculture, you need to subsidize dairy and eggs, and that's where the wealth comes from. I mean, this is nonsense. We need to change that, because fundamentally that's how we colonize people. I mean, if you look at India, more than 60% of Indians are lactose intolerant. So when you have majority of the people are lactose intolerant, why the heck are we subsidizing dairy and helping people consume that product? It doesn't make any sense. So I'd say that I'd much rather that people look at the Sustainable Development Goals and start addressing each goal and see which goal can we address first right away. What happened in the Sustainable Development Goals is that we have goal number 8 which is good jobs and economic growth or something like that. Okay. Everyone thinks that they're going to solve all the sustainable development goals by just growing the economy, by just addressing goal number 8. And I'm saying that's garbage. I mean, as a systems engineer, I know when you have an objective, you have multiple objectives, you don't just focus on one objective and hope all the other objectives will be met automatically. I think that goal number 8 is actually a redundant goal. You really don't need it. And if I solve hunger, if I solve health and well-being, which is good health and well-being is goal number 3 or goal number 4, then why do I care that some number is growing? We really don't. So that to me is a Trojan horse that has been put in place to make sure that the current system continues. The current system of colonialism continues. So I'm advising Indians to just drop goal number 8 and focus first on goal number 2, which is, zero hunger. Shall we make sure that everyone has food? Everyone has healthy food, easily available. That's easy. We can do that, especially when we don't subsidize dairy and the animal agriculture industry. A whole lot of land becomes available for us to grow our plant foods. Okay. And so I'd say, we have great organizations that can make khichdis and a simple food that is nourishing and that is balanced. And they make it for school lunches already. I'm saying, let's just expand that effort and start feeding everyone healthy food and boost our immune system fundamentally. Okay. And when we do that, we become more resilient to even COVID or any of the other infections. And everyone will be well fed, and therefore you're addressing a sustainable development goal right away. And that to me is a low-hanging fruit that we need to address. And once we address one goal and we meet that goal, it energizes people. It's a little bit like what Nelson Mandela did in helping South Africa win the Rugby World Cup, right? A year after he became president. It united the people of South Africa so that they said, oh, we are in this together. No matter.
Lost you again.
Yes, Dr. Shailesh. Can you hear me?
So what color our skin is. And so that, I mean, been flaked last month. So that to me is leadership. And I'm saying, we need to really think about this holistically and start addressing these things, because from an engineering perspective, these are not a tough problem. Okay, getting a man to Mars, that's a tough problem. But getting everyone fed on Earth is not a tough problem. So let's pretend like it's a tough problem that we don't know how to solve. It's a systemic problem.
Thank you. Dr. Shailesh actually bring many important factors. Last week, with the lead of Professor Paul, we arranged food and water securities, and we do some research. Already we observe from South Asia, even specifically Bangladesh and Cox's Bazar area, they have food crisis already. Already they have food security problem because of a lot of Myanmar peoples and many to local community, they have shortage of food. So definitely we have to think about good foods and drinking water as well. Mr. Aaron, yes, already you can understand that we have a lot of policy level problem, we have infrastructure problem, we have lack of collaborations of developed nations and developing nations. So how we can fix it? Specifically, I want to focus on that when we think about healthcare system, we have to think about better infrastructures and these things. So what your observation?
So I actually prepared a little bit of a paper right on this subject. So, you can't discuss any of this stuff without discussing the pollution that causes it and the negative health effects. You have soot, smog. It's like Britain in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution. People are growing up next to coal factories in Asia Pacific, and even worse things, that have lung disease, and that puts a lot of burden on the healthcare system initially in the first place, just from being a newly industrialized areas and growing up in those places. That already overwhelms an already, I guess you would say, kind of rickety healthcare system in the first place. As far as cooperations between developed and developing nations, efforts like yours, as well as efforts of Mr. Talib Raphael's, to get awareness out to people in developed nations and to people in developing nations, as are paramount here. As well as, hold on real fast.
Okay, Mr. Jamesid. So how do you want to respond on this infrastructure problem? Even though we have to develop more green energy, more good transportation system, we have to think about how we can reduce this carbon and this kind of thing. So what your analysis on that point? Can you unmute, please?
My apologies. Thank you, Sharif.
No problem.
Yeah, I think in terms of appropriate technology, and when I say that, I don't mean it just in terms of techniques. It also applies to political systems. It applies, for example, if I live in Nome, Alaska, perhaps I don't grow a banana tree, but where I can grow a banana tree, I should. And political systems take the capitalist system. Capitalism depends upon scarcity, and if it's scarce, I can charge more for it. So, but it's not appropriate when you apply it to healthcare. It's not appropriate when you apply it to food. It's not appropriate when you apply it to water. Water is life. So if I want to make it scarce and charge more for it, then I'm doing something that is the opposite of sacred. And, so we can't be aligned to a particular economic system. And what we need is the political will to change. Now, I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, early 70s. I don't, you can maybe see my beard. We were empowered back then. We thought we could change the world. And I look around now, and it's got to be the youth. It has to be the young, because the old people have power. Things are working out the way they wanted to them. They're reluctant to change. They won't change on their own. They need to be pushed, and it is the youth that needs to push them. But the youth today thinks that, oh man, it doesn't matter what I do. And I tell them, then you're just another brick in the wall. You do matter. You can affect change. And you do it by changing yourself, then your community, and who knows where it goes from there. Because the youth of these countries all together can change the world. I grew up believing that. And we made social change happen. So, it can be done. You just have to have confidence. You can be an agent of change. You can be, maybe not Nelson Mandela, but you can be inspirational to others and help make them agents of change just by changing the way you approach these problems. They are not insurmountable. It matters what you do. So tear down the walls, don't build them, and don't be just another brick in them.
Thank you.
Up to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah. So, sorry, as I was saying, there's a fundamental problem within developed countries where we do hoard resources, where we hoard information. There aren't a lot of bridges being built right now, and there haven't been. That's why I'm always so inspired to see programs like yours and to see world leaders like Mr. Talib, urging towards these things, because right now you're talking about cooperation between developed and undeveloped. That's frankly, it's not something that's happening right now at all on almost any level. And until corporations here in developed countries change and our governments change, which the two are related, but until those things change on a fundamental level, I'm not seeing how we're going to be able to cooperate. And that's why I'm so inspired to see, CEOs like Mr. James Ead over here actually trying to create change in that regard, trying to build these bridges. And through, my future endeavors and all those of the youth community like me who are trying to build these bridges. So ultimately, it seems like it's still a little bit far off to me, but I hope to be proven wrong in that regard. There's changes being made every day in people's hearts and people's minds. And programs like yours, and again, things like what Mr. Talib does are paramount here. I can't stress enough how important that is, because when you do have that exchange of information between the developed and undeveloped countries, you get a lot of feedback from it too that enhances the original ideas, and there's sort of a positive feedback loop that will, by nature, create sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum actually trying to develop a better collaborations. Like we want to bring the board of advisor and the talented mentors, those who can help us, those who can guide us, like Dr. Talib, Mr. Eric, and Mr. Paul and James said. And we need more energetic people like you and those who can support our initiative, because we need to involve with grassroots level. So we need more people to involve and more people to collaboration. So we are requesting every time those who are interested to join in World Talent Economy Forum, you can join as a volunteer and board of advisor. And I'm very much happy we are working with MIT. So MIT already they are sharing their students to volunteering with us, internship with World Talent Economy Forum. Yesterday I get information they have 50 students. So they are so from them we will get some talented people, those who contribute for World Talent Economy Forum, and it will be good things, because example, we need more talented people for solving many local problems. So Dr. Talib, what we understand, because for solving these climate change issues and health related issues, we need better political will. How we can
That's right.
develop? Yes, definitely we need better political will. So Dr. Talib, how we can develop better political system? Even what we observe, India also has same political problem, developed nations also have challenges. How we can produce better politician?
Well, it is a political sustainability issue. It's not just climate change. Climate change is a result. It's not the act itself. It's not the cause of things, as has been clear. How do you make the change? You make the change by making the narrative belonging to the people. The developing countries' people don't have their narrative up front. What they're doing, what we're seeing now, is a consequence of the colonial era. We're still at a world that is controlled by so many small number of the governments controlling this world. And until that changes, nothing is going to change, really. But that is changing. I can see it happening. I can see it happening because the developing world is going to rise. Look at Africa, for example. Africa has to build its own narrative. Africa has been discriminated against for centuries now. It's time for Africa now. Africa is the future. If Africa rises and it can develop its own narrative, then the world will change. I completely agree with Eric and the rest of you here when you talk about the change happening from within. It has to be the people's will. It is a political challenge. It's not anything else. Climate change is a political issue, just as COVID is a political issue now, unfortunately. It's not looking at the world as one. Our world has to come together. Our world has to realize that neither COVID nor climate change recognizes any borders or any nationals. But these borders and nationals were put together by the colonial powers, by the powerful people of this world. And they're not going to change unless we change them from inside, from the bottom up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, my questions to you. You are climate change activist, and from my practical experience, major problem for climate change and sustainability is creating better awareness. And who can create awareness? People like you, people like Mr. Paul, those who are the climate change activists. How we can create more awareness and get engaged with the more people.
Well, I think that that's something that, again, it comes back to the people. Wherever we can, we should be collaborating with larger organizations such as yours, even within our communities. Find the church groups. There is a transition movement that is going on all over the world. If you look up transitiontowns.com, there might be one near you. I'm not sure how active they are in Southeast Asia and India, but there are many programs all over the place. I know that in South India and Tamil Nadu, there is Project Green Hands, and so there's many organizations that people can join with and learn from. And once people have at least a baseline level of knowledge and experience, then they can begin to teach within their communities. And my motto is always each one teach 10, because if each of us can get 10 people on board,
Yes.
and each of those 10 get 10 people, that results in exponential growth. And 10 to the 10th power is 1 to the 10th power is 10 billion. So even starting with just a single person, making it a point to get 10 people excited about it, get them lit up. So you might have to teach more like 100 or 1,000 each year, but within that teaching, you'll find 10 people who are ready to begin teaching themselves, and empower them and encourage them to begin leading small workshops and reaching the members of their community that you don't have the time or bandwidth to reach. And in that way, we can take over the world very quickly with people who care about the earth, who are empowered to plant trees and reforest gardens. And, there are great examples throughout the world. There's one gentleman in India who planted an entire forest himself, brought elephants back, brought giraffes back, all of these apex mammals that provide so many services to the ecosystem. There's another gentleman in Africa who was able to push back desert and return it to being forests. There's another gentleman in New Zealand who has also done tremendous work with reforesting large areas in the UK. There's people all over the world basically who have single-handedly, well, not single-handedly, with a group of with a small group of enthusiastic supporters. There are individuals who have reforested large areas of land, and so the power is there. It's in our hands. We can make it happen, and it starts with just each one of us teaching 10 people. Even if you don't know much, what you do know, there are other people who don't know that. So make it a point to reach 10 people a year, and I think that we can turn things around in less than a decade.
Thank you. Mr. Paul, how we can create more awareness? Yes.
Yes, I love the idea of each one teach 10, and also, along with that idea is, the power of one. One person can make huge difference. For example, one person planting a whole forest, as Eric's pointed out. And with James Eade, I love the expression, brick in the wall. And of course, that's a reference to the Pink Floyd song, one brick in the wall. And in terms of what James was saying about the technology, he was talking more about the technology of people organizing themselves to work for the planet. But I just want to talk briefly about, as far as human health and the climate is concerned, obviously the virus is a huge problem. And indoor air quality, we're concerned as environmental people with what's happening in outdoors, but people spend an awful lot of their time indoors. And for human health, indoor air quality is key. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the virus, a year and a half ago or so, the big focus was on surfaces, on the virus being transmitted from surfaces, and wash your hands constantly and stuff. And that's all good, but the main transmission of this virus and like the Spanish flu, 100 years ago, is indoor transmission. These are mostly indoor diseases, and the best way to um, eradicate them or minimize them is by simple technology, which is ventilate indoor spaces, and to have a monitor to measure the amount of indoor ventilation is key. As I mentioned, the CO2 monitors, but air quality is a huge factor, and the biggest killer is the so-called PM 2.5 particles. Now, these are particles that have these are very, very small particles. A lot of them are emitted from from oil burning, coal burning, any carbon burning. And not only do we get the emissions and the gases, but we get the particulate matter, and that's close to the surface of the earth. And the smaller the particles, the deadlier they are, because the small PM 2.5 particles can easily go right into the deepest part of your lungs and get lodged in the alveoli sacs and sit there and cause cancers. So those are the deadly particles. Now, also, air pollution is something that most of humanity is kind of just accepting, as a byproduct of industrial processes, and that's not necessary. The number of people that died from air pollution in a normal period in a normal year is roughly about approaching 10 million people worldwide, and that's about 3 times the level of people that have died in the last year from the coronavirus. Although those numbers are probably way too low. When you talk about if I mean, the way to measure mortalities in any country is you count the number of people that have ended up in morgues around the country, and you just count those people, and you compare, say, the last year while the coronavirus has been on with previous years, and then you can get the actual true death rate. How much it has risen, and it's about at least 3 times higher than has been reported in the news. So what is the best way we need to monitor the ppm 2.5 levels, and we also need to monitor the CO2 levels, like I said, indoors. And the easiest way to do this is to use very inexpensive devices. Technology has miniaturized lasers, and it's miniaturized detectors. And all you need to do with the CO2 detector is you have a little tiny laser which is putting out a wavelength of a CO2 absorption line, and you run this laser through a certain path in a miniaturized device, and you hit a detector, and you measure the amount of energy reaching the detector. And if the CO2 level is higher, it absorbs some of the light, so less reaches the detector. So you calibrate the device, and you can get an accurate measure of the CO2 level down to parts per million or better, with a very simple device that can be miniaturized and put on a watch. It can be put, on your belt. It can be put on any, on a cap, on your hat, anywhere. Now, the same device with a laser can be used to measure the particles that are the particle count of PM 2.5. Of course, there's lots of particles in the air, and the bigger ones, I said, are less deadly. So you can use, what you do with the laser is when particles cross the beam between the laser and the detector, they put in a drop of signal, slight drop of signal to the detector, and you can just count the number of particles. And the device can have an alarm, and if the CO2 level is unsafe, in an indoor environment, if it goes up to double, then you're in an unsafe environment for virus transmission. And the number of particles, if it crosses a certain level, and it's right on your body, so you're actually measuring the amount of PM 2.5 that's going into your body, and that number can also set off an alarm and say that you're in an unsafe environment. And if we get, of course, with economies of scale, as we mass produce these devices, they're crucial for giving us a metric on, you know, whether we're in an unsafe environment. So I think that can go a long way to improving public health. And these devices, eventually the price will go down to essentially, you know, pennies, or, you know, certain, like, basically very, very inexpensive. And the gain that we will get, you know, health wise from this will be enormous. So I think that should be pushed among the medical community. But the medical community, you know, well, they're not the people that will push this, because the more they need sick people, right, to do their, to have jobs, right? If everybody was healthy on the planet, there'd be a lot less requirement for doctors. So, you know, it's the engineers and scientists, maybe direct some of the MIT people. All you need is some electrical engineers, you know, a couple laser people, and they can work on miniaturizing these devices. There are a number of companies around the world that are making these devices, but they're still, you know, they're not being mass produced. They're not being going into people's watches and things. So, you know, I can't emphasize enough how much this would change the planet. You know, if we just deployed these, develop these, scale up these devices, and lower the cost to next to nothing, then they'll be ubiquitous. They'll be everywhere. And you know, you'll notice a difference when you go for a walk. You can walk through a little forest and see the air is incredibly healthy for you. You can walk through, you know, you can walk along a highway and see, well, maybe I don't want to walk along this highway because I'm breathing in, you know, it's taking months off of my life, just this morning walk next to along a busy highway. And that will let people see how the change, how, you know, there's enormous differences in our world, and depending on where you are. If you're in a city next to, you know, there's a natural gas leak, for example, you know, you just need to tune the laser to a different wavelength to measure the methane level, or a different wavelength to measure the nitrous oxide level. So, you know, eventually when these are miniaturized, they can monitor all kinds of things that are harmful to us, and we can see where these harmful gases are generated, you know, in our cities, where the particulate matter is generated. A lot of it is like something simple like rubber, car tires. You know, the wear and tear, you know, generates huge amounts. So just better technologies to make the tires shed off a lot less particles, right? We can identify ourselves where the sources of these problems are and go to address them. And a lot of people say if you can't measure something, then you know, it's not. Then it's not a. You know, if you can't measure something, if people can't see it, then they don't recognize it's a problem.
Thank you. We have our new friend, Mr. Markley. So hello, how are you, and how do you want to analyze today's topic? So yes.
I mean, definitely glad to be here. Glad to be able to make an appearance. You know, I've always got thousands of things going on over here in North Carolina and everything, including work with the Carolina Theater and everything. But definitely, you know, the environment is something that we've definitely been paying attention to. Been here in the North Carolina area. So, like I've mentioned before on this show, I've got friends that have been working with even some of the recycling programs and some of the efforts to try to make sure that we're not being as dependent on plastic and things along those lines, and even working with some of the restaurants to try to make sure that they're not using some of those products that are not good for the environment. So even here in the South, in North Carolina, we've got folks that are working on this effort, and a lot of people are working on the environmental side. As a matter of fact, one of the projects in terms of entertainment that I'm involved in is the Eno River, and they actually do a big music festival every year, but it's also the celebration of one of our state parks, the Eno River, and a lot of that conversation is around conservation and trying to make sure that people are doing correct things to make sure that they are protecting the environment. And a lot of times, even in this day and time when a lot of folks are concentrating on the pandemic, and definitely so when we're definitely coming out of that slowly as more and more people are getting vaccinated, we're also seeing more and more people that are using this time to pay attention to other world issues, whether that's climate change or whether that's just being good environmental stewards. So that's just some of my immediate thoughts.
Thank you. Mr. Jamsid. Mr.
Well,
Jamsid, yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Sharif. Just a wonderful show. I'm hearing so many interesting ideas, and I'm learning a great deal. And I just want to thank your panelists. And the idea that I keep returning to is start with yourself. You know, if you make changes in your own life, then then your surrounding community, you just don't know where it'll end. So it begins with yourself. And I think, we've already seen some things that are inspirational that I've been moved to see, people planting forests. It's mind-boggling what one person can do. But then you can have that effect on others. And who knows where it'll stop if you start with yourself. So I just want to encourage you. And also, depending on the political system that you live in, you can affect change politically as well. Because the people that are here say jobs first, and that's all that matters. That's part of the problem. Because we live on a planet and we want to give it to, as one of your guests said earlier, we want to think of our future. We want to think of our children, their children's children, and what are we leaving to them? So we have to not only treat animals with respect, you change your diet. Maybe you can't become a vegan overnight, but maybe you can eat less beef. Just make it once a week. Do anything that you do will help. So don't get discouraged. Don't think that you can't do anything or that whatever you do doesn't matter. It does matter. If everyone plays a small part, it will pile up and become more and more important. And vote for people who speak about the things that matter. Don't vote for the people that are trying. And we have this constant barrage on our news thing. News today, whatever channel you're turning to, they're trying to persuade you. They're not trying to inform you. So you inform yourself. This is the responsibility, the duty that you have as a citizen, and not just a citizen of the country you live in. Whatever language you speak, whatever country you're from, it doesn't matter. You're on the planet Earth. So take care of the planet. Take care of the animals that live on the planet. Take care of the people. Food and water should be available, and they should not be scarce. And it's not in our best interest to make them scarce so that we can charge more for them. That is the opposite of sacred thinking. It is selfish, and you want to be selfless in your approach. Thanks again for a wonderful show.
Thank you. Mr. Aaron.
Yeah, so I always come back to the leading by example as far as the power of one goes. And you got to think to yourself when you're out at the beach, what can I be doing right now? Well, if you see trash on the beach, pick it up. Other people are going to see this, and they're immediately going to feel guilty that they walked by it and didn't pick it up. So they're going to start picking it up. And when you walk with compassion everywhere you go, and you walk with respect for the environment, people will follow you by default. So that's again, and everybody here has said it, and it's such an incredible point. It starts with you. It starts with you going out and thinking, what little thing, if I see a gum wrapper on the street, I'm going to throw it in the trash. And anybody should, not everybody does, but when one person does it, people start to follow.
Thank you. Thank you. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. Before that, I just want to add some point, because we finishing our 1 year of journey. We are arranging our futuristic leadership like award and summit. So those who join, support our initiative for World Talent Economy Forum. So we will provide our certificates from World Talent Economy Forum. And beside that, we need more volunteers, because we are developing our communities, and we want to develop a better media which will help to create awareness to the grassroots level people, to the developed nation people, even though the developing nations people. But definitely we need a global platform. But I'm very much happy last 1 year, at least we involved with 300 different corporations, as well as we involved with like 100 different countries from Africa, from Asia Pacific, from Europe, from Middle East, from South Asia, from USA, from Canada, from Europe, everywhere. We're getting a lot of support. So thank you for all of your support. Beside that, we are developing our organizations. We need to go for our fundraising and this option. So if you want to support our initiative, we have our PayPal account, presidentwtforum@gmail.com. You can support World Talent Economy Forum, because there are a lot of things we have to solve together. As an individual person, as an individual organization, we cannot do much. But if we get your collaboration, hopefully we can solve many problems together. And I'm sure millions and millions of people need our help. They need our support. We need to collaborate and we need to work together. So thank you everyone for all of your support. Last 1 year, I getting from too much of speaker from around the world, many organization, many people. So we have lot of hope. We have a lot of people, and by this way, we can solve many local community problems. So I want to start from Mr. Eric. What is your concluding remark? Then Dr. Talib, then Mr. Jamesy, then Mr. Paul, then Marky, and finally Mr. Aaron. Mr. Eric.
So we didn't really get to dive a whole lot into particulars on this particular conversation, but some things that come to mind, especially for the developing nations, there are some really important technologies that I think everyone should have access to. And, you know, like just to dive right into it, I think that solar hot water heaters are one of the #1 things, because having access to hot water enables us to clean ourselves very effectively. And that makes a huge difference with the spread of disease and with our overall health and wellness. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that just soaking in a hot bathtub can contribute to the creation of little proteins in the body known as heat shock proteins. These heat shock proteins improve cardiovascular health. They help to make the body more resistant to DNA damage and a number of different things. If you aren't aware of heat shock proteins and heat shock in general, it's very, very important. Cold shock pairs very well with it. That's a whole nother conversation, but hot water is absolutely essential. Another thing that comes to mind is wood gasification. A lot of people in developing nations are using dung and open fires to cook with. That leads to even deeper respiratory problems. What Paul was speaking about in regard to the steadily diminishing air quality issues. When you're cooking inside of a hut with an open fire, you are actively creating the worst possible air quality conditions that anyone can be forced to suffer through. So wood gasification, even if it's only on a very small scale for cooking meals, is an absolutely essential technology. To take it a step further, you could get into methane digestion, which is where you take organic matter and you feed it to anaerobic methogenic bacteria. And those bacteria, which are very largely present in the digestive system of ruminants. So you can take cow dung or horse dung or sheep dung and use that as the inoculant. And then at that point, you can begin to feed that system human dung, banana leaves, any kind of grass clippings, any organic matter can be the main digesters, and it will give you a clean burning source of fuel so that you can cook indoors while simultaneously sequestering methane, which is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. And this also leads to a sewage disposal system that helps to prevent pathogenic bacteria from being able to spread when people are disposing of their excrement in pits or open holes of any kind. That allows the pathogens, any potential pathogens that have made it through the digestive system, to spread. Fecal coliform bacteria can then be spread by flies and other insects. So these are some very basic technologies that can help lead to greater levels of sanitation and greater levels of health. And of course, going back to local food, basing our diet more on tree crops and less on grasses, and getting lots of good exercise. Get out there and shake your body and dance and laugh and smile and give each other big, big hugs. if you're co-quarantining with people, share affection with the people that are in your inner circle, because all of these things help to boost our immune system in incredible ways. And be very kind, be compassionate, be grateful for every breath that comes through you, because that gratitude helps to boost the immune system tremendously as well. So thank you so much for having me on,
Thank you.
Sharif. Many blessings to everybody who sees this. Be very well. Be a good teacher. Spread the word.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Talib, what's your concluding remarks?
Thank you so much. I just want to add that one thing. I'm not as qualified as Eric or Paul in these technical matters, but I can say one thing. Whatever our business in life is, whatever it is, no matter what we do in life, our sole and core business in life must be to leave this world a better place, to make this world a better place. That's what James was trying to say. We start with ourselves, definitely, and we make it better. We are a lucky generation. We think that the world is falling apart if you follow the news, but the world is getting better and better, whether we admit it or not. We're living in a much better world today than we were yesterday. Imagine if we were born in the year 19,000. You'd have witnessed the pandemic, First World War, the Second World War, and probably you're still suffering from it. Today, the world is a much better place. It's going to be better. Be part of it, definitely. It's the political challenge that is the most dominant to me. I think political sustainability is very, very important here, because climate change is a symptom, is not a cause by itself. And although all these technical issues are very, very important issues, they get solved. Human beings have been able to deal with issues that are much more complicated than this before in their history. And they overcome it. We're going to overcome it. Whether people like it or not, we're going to overcome this. So that's what I want to say at this point in time. Trust yourself. Be a brick in a new wall, not in the existing wall. Not the wall that's behind James now. That's not the wall we want you to be part of. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Talib. Actually, when you join, it's a big inspiration for us, for everyone, and for World Talent Economy Forum. So, Mr. James Seed, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Thank you, Sharif. I just want to applaud you for what you're doing. 288 episodes, and I've learned something on every one that I've been on. And I did get called out. The brick in the wall is a Pink Floyd reference, but I have another one. We talked about, was Manhattan more beautiful before they built the New York City, and what New York City has done for the world, and the opportunities that have come from it. Well, there's a lyric in the song that used to break my heart. We paved paradise to put up a parking lot. And but we cannot live in the past. We cannot wish for what was. And there's no sense in wishing for what we cannot have. And there is something for appreciating, for being grateful for what we do have. And that gratitude does boost your immune system. It does have positive effects. But I say to myself every day, surrender to the moment, to be fully present. Live in the present. And what can you do to make the present better? This is important. This is be grateful. This is the most important thing that I try to do on a daily basis. And I have a quick forgetter. I forget. So I have to remind myself on a daily basis that this is why I am here, to help others. If I have resources and they do not, why wouldn't I share them? So we have to get around the mindset of taking from others and get into the mindset of giving. And this is how we break down the walls between us. These walls are man-made. They can be unmade by man.
That's right.
And I just really appreciate the many people on their shows have more technical backgrounds than I do, but I think we're all aligned in trying to make the world a better place. And this is, how do we do this? We start with ourselves, but we learn it through cooperation, that as a team, we're better. And if we start thinking about what the planet Earth can do for us, and think in terms of what can we do for the planet Earth, we may be closer to arriving at solutions that we all want. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Paul, what's your guideline? And you are also a scholar. You are a climate change activist. We need more of like scholar like you who can guide us, who can create more awareness for in the developing nations.
Yes, thank you, Sharif, again for the all your work in the World Talent Economic Forum initiatives and shows and stuff, and it really brings together lots of great people to exchange ideas. Both panelists and people that are watching the show. So I think we have a lot of there's a lot of things that we can do to to improve the situation, to address, try to mitigate climate change. But there's a lot in the pipes, so to speak, already that we need to work with adaptation. And if people can understand, if the general public can understand more about what CO2 level actually is, outside when they're walking, inside a building, what the particulate level is, what the methane levels are. If people can see, if these measurements can be incorporated into things like phones and watches and, even items of clothing, perhaps. I mean, they can be miniaturized and if the public can see what these things are and how they're changing, that will, be one big step, I think, to getting more widespread awareness of the climate problem and the air pollution problem and indoor air quality problem. And if you think about it, one of the ways that human civilization advanced, through history was, things like, water sanitation, right? Water quality, water purification, and, elimination of waterborne diseases, for example. Also, in the horse and buggy era, there was a lot of filth, a lot of the droppings of the horses on city streets and stuff, and we cleared those up. And we haven't really addressed the air, like we have our water and our the different organizations that monitor food quality and nutrition and stuff. I mean, we've done all those things, but we pretty much ignored the air that we breathe. And the air that we breathe is vital to keep CO2 levels within certain limits, to keep air particulate within certain limits, both indoors and outdoors. We really haven't addressed that issue the same way that we have done for water sanitation. So it should become a basic human endeavor to monitor, the air quality from a human health perspective. And then if we do that, then that really raises recognition for people on how much the greenhouse gas levels have changed. We've changed the chemistry of the atmosphere, and it's not only causing climate change, but it's having great effect on human health. And even for corporations that have boardrooms and they have meetings, once the virus is not a problem, they'll resume meetings. The air quality in those rooms, when CO2 levels get too high, people start having poor decision making, and they can't basically think straight, and they're yawning, and they feel tired, and the room just feels stuffy. So productivity plummets, in any environment like that. And it's easy to monitor that type of, and all you need to do quite often to solve the problem is just crack a window open. I'm not talking about, you don't need to open the window fully. If you have a couple windows on either side of a room and the room is super stuffy, if it's a closed off room, CO2 levels with 10 people in the small room can go up to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 ppm. There'd be in a school or in a corporation boardroom, and people cannot make proper decisions. They're yawning. They're unproductive. So productivity, just from a productivity and dollar standpoint for corporations and an education standpoint for the kids learning, the indoor air quality is vital. It's like a no-brainer to monitor it, and we don't do that. So that will go a long way to addressing human health.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Mr. Aaron, what's your concluding remarks today?
So when we talk about health problems and climate change, one of the points that I think we glanced over is, floods are a health risk, for several reasons. First off is, mosquito population, and then there's obviously the more direct facts of, obviously you can drown in them, as well as disrupting food supply chain, which leads to malnutrition. And that's not even beginning to talk about desertification, which is the opposite of that. And heat strokes, and health effects of that sort. These are very, very real problems as well. So it's one of those things where either you take initiative after the flood happens, after the desertification happens, or you take initiative as it's happening to stop it from happening. And that's the ultimate wager that we're presented with here, is either we get it right, or we might be potentially faced with another dark age. If you see, the sea levels continue to rise, you see deserts continuing to grow, this could be worse than what the last ice age did to mankind. And so in conclusion, I guess my main thing is, if you're at the beach, pick up the trash. If you're on a walk through the forest, and you see something, pick it up. Try to grow your own food. Try to look into permaculture and creating self-sustaining food systems on a local level. And focus on, off-grid power production, localized power production. And ultimately, I think a lot of these problems will save themselves, will fix themselves, as well as, again, just walking with compassion. Look at yourself as a part of the earth instead of something separate from the earth or a controller of the earth. Because honestly, the thought that human beings can control the earth is frankly quite silly. So again, all we can do is just do our best, walk with compassion. If you see trash, pick it up, and just do what you can do every single day before the flood comes.
Thank you. Mark Lee.
Yeah, I was going to add a couple of things. One, I definitely agree with what everybody has said so far about us definitely doing our part, whether that's doing composting or whether that's definitely, if you're out and you see trash, pick it up and things along those lines. So I definitely agree with a lot of our other folks have been saying, because as folks have noted, we're seeing the impact every day. I mean, just recently in those islands off of Ecuador, we saw where, years and years of things have eventually caused a major iconic figure to collapse into the ocean. And that was those big mountain, those towers that were up there that were kind of like a tier and everything, but they collapsed into the ocean because of some of the things that we've been doing. So I would urge folks to, continue doing all their part that they can do on a regular basis. And that's definitely playing our role in trying to be environmental stewards. And as somebody else on here had earlier said, that's also observing the environment, and not just observing it as a passive kind of thing that we do oftentimes, because we'll oftentimes see the birds and the squirrels and the other animals, and we won't pay attention to how we're impacting their lives. So we need to be observing them, but not as if they're some like little part of the scenery that we're just looking at just for our enjoyment. We need to be thinking about the impact that we're having on their lives, as well as any of the lives that we're impacting on a regular basis. So that's one of the things that I urge folks to do, is to pay attention to Mother Nature and the ways that we're having that impact. Here in North Carolina, we've had a lot of people that have been doing research on wind power and solar power, and definitely that's something that I encourage more people to study and think about even using in their own lives when they're able to do that. And on a similar note to Jim E., I'm going to say that, a lot of these issues are issues that we've been dealing with for years, and sometimes those issues also impact the music that is sung about and all of that. So I've actually got two songs that are, in my mind, are songs that I think impact a lot of what's going on. And one is Imagine, and that's definitely the world that I'm always hoping that we'll be living in, is a world of peace and all of that John Lennon sang about. But I'm also a fan of Marvin Gaye. And he had a song called Mercy, Mercy Me, which was actually about ecology and all of that. So, one of the lyrics, and he wrote this song some 50 years ago because he wrote it back in 1971. But one of the lyrics said, whoa, oh, mercy, mercy me. Oh, things ain't what they used to be, ain't what they used to be. Where did all the blue skies go? Poison is the wind that blows from the north and south and east. Whoa, mercy, mercy me, yeah. All things ain't what they used to be, ain't what they used to be. Oh, all oil wasted on the ocean and upon our seas, fish full of mercury. And then it goes on going on, mentioning some other things, including the radiation underground and a number of the other things that we've been talking about. As a matter of fact, one of the lyrics says, animals and birds who live nearby are dying. What about this overcrowded land? How much abuse from man can she stand? Realize I just said that those songs were written in 1971. So those lyrics were written in 1971. And I think that Jim Eaves and others that are here with us would agree that these are lyrics that are still relevant today, some 50 years later.
Thank you, Mr. Markley. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. I request all of our audience share our content as much as possible. Even our speakers, you can share our content in between your communities. All of you are highly influential people, so when you share, it will be really helpful for us. Even I request all of our audience and everyone subscribe our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook, and share with your political people, share with your policymakers, share with your corporation, share with your academia. I'm sure this kind of content actually really helpful for you and for your development. Thank you, Dr. Talib. Thank you, Professor Paul. Thank you, Mr. Aaron, Mr. Markley, and Mr. Jamsid for joining today's sessions. And thank you for supporting World Talent Economy Forum initiative last 1 year with all of your time and effort. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.